Well, good morning and welcome to the Installer Plaza here at Installer Show 2024. And we're sponsored by our good friends at Valence. So lovely to see you here. Thank you very much. I'm joined by a panel this morning and we're going to start with one of our great debates. The UK government has set a target of 600,000 heat pump installations by the year 2038. But what does that actually mean? What does it look like? Not all heat pumps are the same and different heating systems will be suited to different technologies. Well, I've got a panel of really great experts joining me this morning, and we're going to have a discussion about this. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you. Contestant number one on my left-hand side, tell us who you are, where do you come from?
Thank you. Dan Roberts, Technical Director of Kensa Heat Pumps, the UK's only manufacturer of ground source heat pumps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Melanie Auvray, working at the European Heat Pump Association. I'm the policy manager.
Okay.
Morning, Dave. Morning, everyone. Paul Honeyman. I'm from Valent Group UK, Head of Product Management for the UK and Ireland. We're headquartered in Remscheid, and our local headquarters for the UK are in Belper in Derbyshire.
And it's your 150th anniversary.
Funny you should say that.
Not
it is
you
our
personally.
150th birthday. Yeah, I'm looking good on it.
Yeah. Sesquicentennial. You are looking, well, not bad. The plastic surgery's worked. And finally, no.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hamid Salimi, and I'm the National Residential Product Manager for Daikin UK.
Brilliant. Well, panel, welcome. Actually, Melanie, may I start with you? I was saying about the target of 600,000 by 2030. What's Europe looking like in terms of targets and where it stands at the moment?
Yes, so the European Commission with Repower EU announced 6 million heat pumps by 2030. Right now, we have sell 3.1 million heat pumps in 2003. It's a bit of a drop compared to last year because of the inflation rate, because of the instability into the elections. But some of the country we're still increasing, so it's okay. I don't know if you want to know more about the UK.
Well, yeah, because I was going to ask you, and this isn't a flippant question, you know, we're not part of Europe anymore in the UK, but is that included in that figure, or is that separate? Is the 600,000 a separate target?
No, it's...
I've stumped her. Brilliant.
Our data in EHPA, so the sales data that I just gave you, it's included because we count as Europe.
Right.
But I have to say, are the European Commission taking into account the UK?
Right.
I will have to come back on that to you.
No, that's fine. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I mean, genuinely
it's fine.
an interesting question. And so, I just wonder, is this something we can adopt in the UK, what's happening in Europe? You know, go on, you're nodding, Dan.
Yes, I think it is something we could adopt. We've got to make some changes in the UK.
What changes? Are you gonna
If we look at what we tend to call the spark gap, and that's the difference between the cost of gas to deliver a kilowatt of heat and the cost of electric to deliver a kilowatt of heat. In the UK, that's quite broad, 3 to 4 ratio. In European countries, in some, that's pretty much 0 and up to 1. And I think the deployment of heat pumps in the UK is largely dependent on that spark gap coming down.
Right, Melanie, you're nodding furiously here.
If I may comment on that, this
please.
is the number one key point to do in Europe. It's everywhere. I mean, some countries are doing better. We have a map in our website that defines which country are better than the others, and we clearly see a link for the heat pump sales where this ratio is lower than 2, so we have an equality between the price of gas and electricity. The heat pump market boom. And it's really the key point. There are many actions to do to improve our industry and the rollout of the heat pumps Europe-wise, but this point is major. This is the number one.
Right, Hamid, you're nodding furiously as well. Nice and close to the mic.
Very good topic. Spark gap, as you said, Dan. So from July, the spark gap is going to be higher than 4. Now, compare it with Netherlands, for example. In Netherlands, it's below 1. Sweden is slightly higher than 1, and France and Italy 2.5. Now, when you compare this with the efficiency of the heat pump 2.53, it has to be 2.5 to be compelling for someone to save with the heat pump. And that's something very important. So spark gap is the first one to persuade people and to get them to buy heat pump. And then the other thing which is important is is the funding in here, which we need to work on. Now, just to give you an idea, there is funding for other types of heat pumps, like air-to-air in some European countries. When you look at Germany, for example, the funding that you get by replacing a boiler with a heat pump is almost twice as much as what we give for under boiler upgrade scheme. And that's why it's very popular in Germany and other European nations compared to the UK.
So let me ask a question out of ignorance, if you like. Are consumers, the customers, the end users, if you like, more savvy? Do they know more about it in Europe, for instance? Because how can we expect customers to understand what they want? Because there's an education job that needs doing. Is education better in Europe? I'm asking really, I suppose.
I wouldn't say that is
Are they
education.
more aware?
I wouldn't say there's more awareness or education. It's about price. When the price and the business model is right, everything move along. And it's also the installers are really expert into the field. So it's mostly the installers who would advise to the consumer what is right for them in terms of business model. They cannot advise a heat pump when it will be too expensive for them in the long run. It doesn't make sense.
Right, because Paul, I'm guessing that the installers, your best sales force, they're there with the customer face to face. They're also the people who get blamed when it goes wrong. So they're a massive influence for you, and they've got a great job they can do to educate. Because I know certainly from my personal experience, we have our friendly local plumber we use in emergencies, because that's normally what it is. And normally it's a question of trust. Well, what would you do if you were in the same situation as us? But they're your greatest sales.
Yeah, they are. I mean, with heat pumps, it becomes more of a considered purchase for the end user. So the homeowner is doing their research and their homework, but they will still be very reliant, if you like, on the expertise of that installer. And this is a huge gap that we have in the UK for the mass deployment of heat pumps, is the number of highly qualified engineers to be able to install these heat pumps. You know, we've got 120,000 gas safe registered engineers in the UK. And yet we're up to 4,000 MCS accredited heat pump installers. There's a massive skills gap for mass deployment of heat pumps.
So how do you bridge that gap? What's the proposition that's going to bridge that gap?
I
Because
think
you've got to take them off the tools for a start. Which
they
nobody
have
wants
to come off the
do.
tools. They have to do training. They have to want to develop their journey into heat pumps. But for the ones that do, there are some rich pickings out there, because you know they've got the cut of the chase, if you like. They're in at the early doors. Although heat pumps have been around since sort of 2006, we launched our first air-to-water heat pump for Vaillant. It's still, I would say, a fairly immature market based on what you were talking about in European countries.
Yeah.
If I talk to my German colleagues, they either have a boiler or they have a heat pump. And in the UK, we're still seeing this, what are these newfangled heat pumps? They're not new. They've been around for a very long time. It's just that the market is still quite immature.
Dan, go on.
Yeah, if I may come in there on the skills gap. Excuse me. Any gas installer out there registered has the skills to install heat pumps, whether that be air source or water source. In fact, they're largely overskilled. There is a confidence gap. And what manufacturers can do, and similar to what we do at Kensa, is offer an MCS umbrella platform where they can come and partner with us, and we can give design support, oversight, and actually offer MCS accreditation for those first few installs.
Right.
As they get used to the requirements of being an MCS installer. It can be quite off-putting and quite a big commitment. And when you actually go through it and you realise that heat pumps are exceedingly easy to get right, they're just as easy to get wrong. So
I was
you
just
just
going to
act
say,
cautiously.
yeah.
It's a lot less scary after you've done 2 or 3 installs than that first one. And we should hold their hands at that point.
It's like a surgeon on his first 2 or 3 operations. Once he's done those, he get the others, he's out of the way, he's fine. And looking at air source heat pumps, what are the easy win properties for air source heat pumps? Who wants to pick that up? Yeah, go on.
New build, definitely. You know, we should have been putting heat pumps into new build for the last 8-10 years, and we're only just picking up, you know, from next year. You can design a heat pump in at the very early stages when you're at architect stage, when you're in new build. New build, self-build are the big wins. We should have been doing it a long time ago.
How many you were going to say?
I think, yeah, I agree with Paul, new builds, but also just wanted to give you some figures. So the the highly insulated properties. So in the UK, almost 50% of housing stock has EPC ratings of A, B, and C, which means they are highly efficient. They've got some sort of insulation. Another figure, 60% of the houses have cavity wall, and 70% of those houses have got some sort of insulation. So although in theory you can fit a heat pump in any house, in theory you can fit in a tin shed, but as an industry we should focus on fabric first, yeah, to have an impact of the high efficiency of those houses. And we have those houses, so focus on those houses, focus on new build. And one more thing, and it may sound odd, but the new build properties currently that are built, they don't have heat pumps. They don't have to fit heat pumps until 2025, but the proactive ones are getting heat pump ready. What that means is they've got larger radiators, they've got larger pipes instead of micro-bore pipes, which are not good for heat pump.
Yeah.
And I know it might sound odd, but moving into those properties a few years down the line, it's much cost effective to then replace the boiler with the heat pump compared to a property where I have to make so many changes and
Right.
change the pipes and hydraulic separation and everything.
Right. Yes, go on. You're going to say something.
If now, yes.
Yeah.
And also something that is really funny, if you look at the market data and the comparison between air to water and air to air heat pumps, you see that actually the highest penetration of heat pumps in these countries is actually the air to air that goes first, before a tiny bit before the air to water. And they are Finland, Norway, you have also Denmark, and then the south, of course, because of the cooling effect, Italy, Spain, Portugal.
Do you have any, I mean, having mentioned about the efficiency of homes here, do you have any info or data on European homes, what the efficiency, or buildings, what the efficiency is there at all?
No, that we don't.
No,
We don't.
okay. Are there instances where air source is harder to fit for UK homes? And if so, what are the alternatives?
Probably not what you would think, to
Right.
be honest. There's this it's a sort of understanding that if it's a reasonably new build property and it's been well constructed, that it's easy to deploy heat pumps.
Yeah.
And older properties, it's much more difficult. We did a scheme with Kevin McLeod's Heat Pump Possible, and one of those buildings was actually a Grade 2 list.
Right.
And we managed to get a heat pump working really well in there. So you can engineer those solutions.
But how much work did you have to go through to do that?
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, it's more difficult, and you have to engineer these solutions in, and you have to know what you're doing. We've just put a water source heat pump into a UNESCO World Heritage Site, for instance. So
Right.
these sorts of properties can be done. The kind of house I live in, 2006, on paper, should be fantastic because it's got the insulation.
There's
It's
a
been built
butt
to the
coming, isn't it?
micro-bore pipe, tiny little radiators designed to run at 82 degrees. The micro-bore's buried in the wall. It's a massive undertaking for me to put a heat pump into my
And
house.
by and large, when people are buying those properties, they don't know that.
Of course not.
They have
Of course
no
not.
idea.
If they're not in the industry.
'Cause I expect to, like, turn the switch on, a light comes on. When I want open the tap, I want hot water, and when the heating, I want the house warm. I mean,
Which is another good point as well. We're still selling boiler cylinders in the UK.
Yep.
Whereas if my cylinder goes pop tomorrow, surely to get ready for low temperature systems going in, you would put in a high recovery cylinder as standard, let your boiler run on it, and then your heat pump ready for the future as well. But to go back to your original question about where are the difficulties in the deployment of heat pumps, for me it's blocks of flats. Very difficult to put an outdoor unit on a 15-story block of flats.
Yeah.
Back-to-back terraces in city centres where it's, you haven't got the outside space. Those are the kind of properties that are difficult to address with air source.
I'm feeling a bit depressed, actually, I've got to say, from the answer, but I mean, go on.
Sorry.
I just wanted to add something to this. Look, sometimes we underestimate the industry. It's a clever industry, and we've got some innovative products and solutions. And we just think air-to-water heat pump, but we have got other solutions. So air-to-air heat pumps,
Right.
for example. Going air-to-water heat pump, we've got refrigerant split. So I know it's not going to be a very high-rise buildings, but for the apartments, refrigerant indoor can be positioned, or outdoor can be positioned from the indoor 50 up to 50 meters away.
Right.
With some of the systems. So again, high-rise buildings, you have refrigerant split, you have air-to-air heat pumps, which again, it's something which many companies have started campaigning about using the typical air-to-air heat pump or an air conditioner as you know it from a convenience shop or a barber shop, that could be used for heating. And if that's combined with, say, a domestic hot water heat pump, which is a cylinder with the heat pump on top, then all of a sudden you have a renewable solution to give you hot water and space heating and cooling in summer if required. So we should think outside the box, and I think we need to train our installers to think outside the box as well. Dan was right. We've got a lack of confidence. We have to build that confidence to be able to understand the products that we already have, and then propose those to the end users, because the end users don't know a lot.
No, you need to say something else. Dan, I can see the cogs turning in your head there.
Lots of cogs turning, lots to come back on. I knew my time would come, so I didn't want to interrupt. There's as we said at the end there, the UK heat pump industry is really innovative. There isn't a problem that exists that hasn't been worked on or overcome. The microbore is one that gets raised often. We've got dozens of systems working on microbore. You might have to drop a couple of percentage points to deliver a functional system on a large Delta T, but there is a lower cost solution than ripping out all the pipework.
Right.
To the radiators running at 80 degrees, these boilers that were installed 10, 15 years ago should have been installed as a condensing boiler. Should have been installed running on a lower temperature to condense, but they weren't. So we're lumping that problem in with the heat pump install. We're suggesting that we have to update radiators as part of the heat pump, and it's no. If they were installed to condense in the first place, there'd have to be far less radiators upgraded now to facilitate a heat pump install.
What chance has the poor consumer like me got, you know?
Not whatsoever. That's why we need the installer base. As you said, your point earlier, we trust our installers.
Yeah.
Installers are handed down through the generations. I might use the same heating engineer that my mum used. And the consumer trusts that individual, and we need the installers to trust the solutions as well.
It's true, because I have utmost trust in my installer. I can send him a message. He says to me, send it at night, send it at the weekend. I might not answer, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. And that's what you want as a consumer, is confidence in your installer. Let's talk about ground source for a minute.
Please.
Funny that, isn't it? But I don't want you to answer any of these questions. No. What properties or applications particularly suit ground source?
There isn't a property in the UK that doesn't suit ground source. I think it's and there's every
That doesn't.
property that doesn't suit it.
Right.
Ground source can be installed into every property in the UK, either through network ground source or standalone ground source. However, there are some where alternative solutions are preferred. Ground source really comes into its own in the high-rise tower block. That's where you have individual heat pumps in each flat with a combined network ground array. Again, for the large-scale new build, we've been installing in the thousands of new build properties for the last 8 years. Where there's a grid infrastructure, electrical infrastructure barrier, ground source can really, really help reduce those electrical loadings.
So it's kind of best for housing associations and the sort of
new
builds
build,
and so on.
large-scale new build, housing associations, and the larger properties as well. But as I say, there's a solution for every and it's not going to be ground source every time. But we make the mistake to the fabric first point earlier on. I think what people are trying to achieve is they want to get as much carbon bang for their buck as possible. If you've got £15,000-20,000 to spend on an upgrade to make your house less carbon intensive, that might not be the best thing to put EWI on. It might be to install a heat pump. If you've got cavity wall insulation, double glazing, and 300 mils of loft insulation, that can be enough. Spend the money and go for a heat pump install next.
Brilliant. Does anybody else want to make a comment at all? Come back on that. I was just going to say, if anyone's got a question or a comment they'd like to make, then feel free. Stick your hand up. We'll come to you. Was that a hand up? No, it was just waving. Just waving. Then feel free to waving back. Then we'll come to you to hear what you've got to say. Hybrids are being talked about more for properties that don't have a cylinder. Are there examples where this could be an easier and more cost-effective way to introduce heat pumps in UK homes? You're smiling.
I think hybrid is the best solution. it could be used as a transition product for most properties. Now, I love the figures and data and everything. So
I would never have known, to be honest.
so there are 23 million homes with boilers in the UK, and
Right.
and about 80% of those homes have got combi boiler. So those homes which don't have any space for the tank. Now the best thing about a hybrid is it doesn't need a tank. So you install it without a tank. So again, all of a sudden you've got an opportunity where you can install a product without a tank. So hybrid is the best solution, and that's going back to what I said earlier, thinking outside the box and using all solutions, air to air, hybrid, air to water heat pump. Another benefit of hybrid is, I think is another data that I have, 1.1 million boilers a year are replaced based on distress purchase. So it's a distress purchase market. Now, if someone's boiler breaks down on a cold winter night, and if they want to replace it with a renewable solution, for a heat pump, they'll have to wait a bit longer, because we talked about the skills gap, installers, and the heat pump.
So do
But
they
with the
stay
hybrid-
cold for a long while, or what do they?
But with hybrid is a good solution
Yeah.
to step into that renewables, because you can install hybrid much quicker. It takes between a day to a day and a half to install a hybrid, compared to a heat pump, which could take a bit longer. Doesn't need a tank, doesn't need radiators replacing in most cases. It's the best solution, and over 85% of the UK is on the gas grid. So again, a best opportunity for us to install hybrid in those places where it's a distress purchase, where someone wants to replace their boiler with a renewable solution as soon as possible, so a quick fit, and also in those properties where there is no space for the tank.
Paul, again, you were nodding along there. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, a hybrid solution for me ticks so many boxes. Exactly the point around the combi. You know, people have repurposed their cylinder cupboards now. People don't have airing cupboards where they've had a combi put in. It's now an ensuite bathroom, or it's extra bedroom space, or whatever. So having a combi to deliver your hot water and then supported by a heat pump is a great solution. The other advantage is, I mean, it doesn't attract any of the boiler upgrade scheme funding that homeowners can access. That's $7,500, unfortunately. But MCS has a requirement to size a heat pump for 100% of the load at the design temperature, so down to -3, which means that usually heat pumps are working harder than they need to, in fairness. With a hybrid solution, you could drop down in size potentially and have the heat pump running for 80% of the year, and just using your boiler for those real beast from the east moments where you've got -10, -15, where heat pumps aren't quite as efficient, and you're getting the best efficiency out of both these systems. But coming back to the point that Dan made about high temperature distribution systems, absolutely right. You know, condensing boilers only condense when the return temperature is lower than 55. We've got all these systems out there that have put on on-off thermostats that are just giving an on-off signal to the boiler. The boiler's running at 80 degrees and hardly ever condensing. We need to get into the mentality of low temperature systems, high recovery cylinders, designed for 55, and then it doesn't matter what the heat generator is.
Melanie, sorry, go
Sorry,
on,
can I just come in on the lack of hot water tank?
Yeah.
It is one solution. Another could be phase change thermal storage. Over the last 5 years, we've replaced over 4,500 combi installs with a ground source install and a SunAmp phase change thermal storage. Small box, storing latent energy into a phase change material, and you can extract that, and that gives the added benefit of still being able to shift that load to an off-peak time. So again, you're running at a higher efficiency and a lower cost electric. So it's
I absolutely agree with you, Dan. Distress purchase all the way. It is what it is. I mean, you don't go thinking, I think I'm going to go out and buy myself a new heating system today. Let's go out, darling, and see what we can find. But what sort of choices are people making in Europe, the consumers? What are they choosing to install or to have installed?
It really depends on the country. But the most important message in this panel is that we have a heat pump for all situations. We have so many
Alternatives.
technologies, so
Yeah, yeah.
many options
Yeah.
that we need to consider. There is no, or almost no,
There's no
situation.
silver bullet where you've got one
No,
system
no
that fits
silver
all.
bullet, indeed, and no, almost no situation where we don't have a product. It's just that it needs to be known and it needs to be installed. And if you look at the EU markets, we are going to publish actually our market report next week.
Right.
And if you look at it, it's really depending on the countries. Some countries prefer air to water, some are a bit more also toward the grounds, heat pump, a lot in the south, air to air. We have the Netherlands who are really into the hybrids right now. A lot of hybrids being installed, so it depends really on the countries. And yeah, the UK, as you may know, is a lot about air to water
Yeah.
and boilers. Actually, the rate of installation of heat pumps this year, well, last year, 2023, was only 4%,
Wow.
4.6 actually percent, a bit less than 5%. So it's really low. We need to work on that.
With that report and everything, seems like next week's a big week for lots of reasons all over the world. But just looking at that, could a mix of technologies also work for properties? I mean, I'm looking, for example, heat pump cylinders, solar PV, battery storage, electric radiators, rather than a full wet heat pump system. Could that work?
Yeah, I think if you start seeing your house as an energy system and utilising the benefits of one solution to improve that of another. For example, PVT, that's photovoltaic thermal,
Yeah.
that linked to your ground array for your heat pump. You can use your ground temperature to cool your PV, which makes your PV more efficient, and that waste heat can go into the ground, which makes your heating more efficient. That's a win-win. Likewise, with a smart home energy management system, you can tap into time of use tariffs. So you can ensure that your EV is being charged at a time when you're home and the sun's shining, or that you're producing your hot water and storing that at the lowest cost to you. So certainly.
Hamid, are you going to bring in some numbers here?
Not numbers this time, but something exciting. Look, I said before we have lots of different innovative products. So
Yeah.
a good example is, as I mentioned before, we know it as air conditioners or split air conditioners,
Yep.
but they're air-to-air heat pumps, so they provide heating and cooling. And when you walk, you will see them on almost every stand. Why don't use them along with domestic hot water heat pump, the example that I gave earlier? Put them both together. The air-to-air is again much easier to install, much quicker to install, and more cost-effective compared to air-to-water heat pump in some cases. We have, for example, and other manufacturers have what's called Multi-Plus, which is a multi-split air-to-air system along with the hot water tank together. So again, for small occupancy residential properties or caravan homes, for example, you put air-to-air indoor units in the room, and there is a tank, not a big tank, so 120 litre water tank, which will give you a good hot water. So all of a sudden you've got a heating, cooling, and hot water from one system. There are various technologies. One more thing. So someone mentions solar technology.
Yeah.
Most heat pumps nowadays are smart grid enabled, which means that you connect them with the solar panels,
Yeah.
and they are clever enough to see when those PV panels generate electricity, and then they'll produce heat. If heat is not needed, they will dump that heat into the hot water, use it as a heat storage, and they can take or transfer the surplus
Smart
electricity back
technology.
to the
Yeah,
grid.
yeah.
So we've got technology.
Paul, I'll come to you in a minute because I know you've got a multi-source product. But Melanie, you wanted to make a point.
Yes, thank you. It's actually regarding the PVs too. So coming back on those, we have seen the past 2 years an increase of installation PVs with heat pump. Why? Because of the Ukraine crisis and the increase of gas, of the price of gas, and the need for the consumer to control the price and to have control over their expenses. And we have seen a lot, I'm French, so I have seen a lot in France, the installation of these two technologies together to have more control. I have no data regarding that, it's just
Don't worry, wait,
an
he's probably got it,
observation.
don't worry. But you've got a multi-source product. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Flexotherm is for use where you've got either a ground collector, an air collector, or a water collector. So that's the product that we used when I was talking about the water mill at Cromford, the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we called it Flexotherm because it's got multiple uses. You can different
That's
collectors.
what it says
whether
on the tin.
Yeah. But going back to your original question about is it possible for different technologies to be deployed in a property? As every speaker said, I think it's probably when one technology such as PVT makes another more efficient, such as a ground source, they all enhance each other. You spoke about batteries, you spoke about PV. What we're finding, a lot of our installers finding it quite difficult to sell an air source heat pump because of the spark gap that we mentioned right at the very beginning and payback. But actually, if you install solar PV and a battery and a heat pump and start telling people, this is going to give you a 10, 11, 12% return on your investment and you're not going to get that cash back sitting in a bank, suddenly it becomes a really nice proposition for the
Quite
homeowner.
attractive.
Yeah, exactly. Not only can I decarbonise, but I can actually put my money to good use.
Brilliant. Has anybody got any comments or questions before I move on? We've got a couple of questions left, a few minutes left. Go
Can
on.
I come
You've
in
got
on
a question.
I've got a question, actually a statement as well. We touched on it loosely over there, cooling. It's becoming more and more of a hot topic, and that pun was intended. Certainly this week, we've seen the need perhaps in some domestic properties for the ability of cooling.
Right.
One of the unique advantages of a ground source heat pump is you have a stored body of fluid at 8 degrees, 5-6 degrees. At the end of your heating season, that ground is cool, you've extracted the energy from it. You can use that to pass over some fan coils in your bedroom, your front room, and deliver passive cooling at a COP of 11 plus. So you're not running the compressor of the heat pump, you're just pumping the ground array over a fan coil. And that will more than satisfy the cooling needs of most domestic properties in the UK.
Do you think there are any learnings we can take in the UK from what Europe's been doing? Well, you can tell us what
Can I
Europe...
jump on that? So at the European level, we have worked on the heat pump action plan. So basically, plan with a bullet of action, set of action that we need to do in order to fast roll out the heat pump and to reach out this 60 million heat pump in Europe.
And is that pan-European? That's across
It's
all the
across European,
Right.
and it's a set of recommendation also for the Commission, but also for the national level to implement certain actions. It goes from the statement and clear political will and show that in the regulation that you are moving toward renewable heating and renewable technology, heat pumps preferably, and set everything accordingly, so including the price, the energy prices.
And who's that aimed at? Is that aimed at the consumer or the installer or everybody?
A bit everyone. It covers everybody, including in this action point, in this action plan, we have a point on the reskilling and a vocational training for the new generation too. So it's a really massive action plan that is or will be public really soon. And in this action plan, of course, it's well recommended that you have a national heat pump action plan in the UK, for instance.
Right.
The French are doing exactly that, and it's really helping the industry to really have a big push. They call it a heat pump center of expertise. And it made a lot of noise, and the point is to protect its industry. It's also... They have the climate angle, but also the industry angle, the competitiveness of our country.
And is that parliamentary led originally? Government?
No, government in France.
Government led, yeah, okay. So government led initiatives. Who knows? The end of next week, what we're going to talk about as a government. There's going to be a change of of personnel anyway, even if it's not party or whatever. What would we like to see from the government moving forward in terms of adopting policies like that and so on?
I think there's, I've got a long list. So we've, as Daikin, we've issued our manifesto to any government who's coming with, I think we've got a 10 points plan, and I think most of everyone here would agree with those 10 points. But to put it shortly, heat pump friendly policies. I'll mention a few of them, yeah? So firstly, we need a clear direction. A direction between whether you want to go to heat pump way or whether is there alternative. At the moment, we've got hydrogen is somewhere, and then we've got we've got heat pumps. Now, I'm not going to talk about hydrogen in too much detail, but it's 6 times more expensive to run something on or to produce hydrogen from the process that we have, the popular process like electrolysis, than to run a heat pump with electricity. That's very important. We talked about the spark gap.
Yep.
Spark gap in the UK, in Europe, we've got the highest spark gap. I gave you some examples earlier. Netherlands is under 1. And we have some good funding. So again, I gave you examples of some other European countries. Clear direction, spark gap, we need to do something, reduce taxes and levies on electricity prices and tariffs, and also more funding.
You're like a walking encyclopedia, I've got to say. It's extraordinary. Go on, Melanie.
It summarizes while the EU action plan. Actually, it's the 3 bullet points that are the most important of the EU action plans.
Right, brilliant. Dan, you were going to say?
Yeah, just it's worth noting that most of the carbon taxes we apply on our energy prices are applied to electricity and not to gas. Obviously, we don't want to see that transition of those taxes onto gas, and to actively move people into fuel poverty would be the wrong outcome. So we appreciate that the levelling up of the spark gap will take time, but we need to start that. We need to set out and make a clear plan so the consumer can take heart.
Brilliant.
That maybe if a heat pump I install today might not be quite as cheap as I'd like, but it will be in 3 years. We also need the government to close out some of the consultations that they've been listing for some time. So to actually, they've gone out to consultation, they've listened, they've heard the feedback, and we're just waiting for these to be closed out and implemented now. Future Home Standard, a prime one, and there's many at there. EPC reform, we touched on it earlier about consumer confidence. We need significant EPC reform in this country to be able to give consumer confidence. At the moment, you put 10 EPC assessors in the same property, and I think you'll get 13 or 14 different answers. And
which is not helpful.
Which isn't helpful. We need a system that can accurately inform our customer base on the carbon intensity of their property and the running cost.
You mentioned it. I mean, supposing there is a change of policy from a change of government, what happens then? Because there's going to be even more confusion in the distress purchasing of what's going on. I mean, I don't know. I'm not throwing that as a question to be answered. I mean, it's just a thought off the top of my head. But Paul, is there anything you want to say?
There can't be any more confusion. Honestly, we are waiting for so many responses to these consultations. Hydrogen's a great example. Future Homes is another example. We waited on the improving boiler standards that just got released a few months ago, and that referred to another consultation that we've got to now wait for.
Need a consultation about consultations, don't we?
Exactly, yeah, meeting about a meeting. It's crazy. But from a homeowner point of view, I think government need to make it easier for low-income homes maybe to adopt this kind of technology. We spoke about batteries, PV, heat pumps. You know, these are really expensive outlays. Green mortgages, that sort of thing, would all help to stimulate our market.
It's been a shame this year that we've not been able to have any government representatives for obvious reasons. You know, that we haven't had them here to answer any questions. Melanie, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes, maybe last thing. This kind of political signal is what also helped the other industries such as solar and wind to really roll out. So this is exactly what we need. We see the comparison between the rollout of this industry is really similar. So we can learn from them.
I wonder if we were to sit here in 12 months' time at Installer 2025, what will we be looking back on saying? I mean, who knows? I mean,
Probably still waiting on some consultations.
should we go and put a bet on it? No, let's not go down that road. Look,
We might have fixed the aircon by then as well with the
Yeah.
heat pump doing it.
Look, are you hanging around? If anybody's got a question they didn't want to ask publicly, but
Absolutely, yeah.
brilliant. And you're obviously just over there, and you're around the corner and everything. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan, Melanie, Paul, and Hamid. Thank you for your input. Fascinating discussion. And I'm sure you're going to get some questions here. And just coming up at 12 o'clock, just to say, we've got the next generation joining us here, and Mark Wilkins from Valent Technologies and training director is going to join me here, and we're going to talk to, well, what is the future of the industry? But in the meantime, thank you very much.